Okay, I'm going to admit them right now. Welcome, everybody. We will be getting started in just a few minutes. Do you want to go ahead and get started, Anthony? You're on mute.
You want to first introduce the press conference, and then I'll go ahead? Okay.
Absolutely. I just wanted to know if you were ready to start.
I'm all set. Hello, everybody.
Okay, welcome everybody. So I'm Crystal Sanchez. I'm the president of the Sacramento Homeless Union, the regional coordinator for the National Union of the Homeless. We are here today to have a press conference regarding the Sacramento Homeless Union to serve Darrell Steinberg with a letter of intention to recall, forming a committee to recall the mayor. And we are also here to respond to the defamatory attacks by SACB. And we are ready to answer any questions. With that, I am going to let you know that this is being recorded, and I will introduce our lead counsel, Anthony Prince.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on this press conference. I'm going to give as brief a report as I can, and then we really encourage questions from the representatives of the media. The first thing, we want to cover 2 or 3 main topics this afternoon. First, we do want to discuss the editorial that appeared the other day in the Sacramento Bee, which we feel is defamatory and libelous on its face. And I'll explain why we have that, we've made that legal determination. And then I want to talk about the impact of that editorial on falsifying the position of the California Homeless Union and in attempting to shift the narrative away from the wrongdoing of Mayor Steinberg, who is the object of a recall effort that we are heading up, shift attention away from the recall and to turn the Sacramento Bee into a fan club of Mayor Steinberg, as opposed to being an objective journalist, part of the objective journalist community. So I want to say, first of all, that I think everyone here has probably seen the Sacramento Bee. Maybe everyone here has seen the editorial that was published in the Sac Bee on February 8th. I want to say, first of all, that I'm going to go through some points, and then I'll touch on the issue of defamation. First of all, I think at the beginning of the editorial, it's stated that, and I'll quote, it says, "Violence is always the wrong response to political grievances in a democratic society. This is true whether it's committed by right-wing groups storming the United States Capitol or by left-wing activists attacking the home of Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg." Close quotes. So first of all, as we made very clear in the official statement on the protest that we released several days ago, and which the Sacramento Bee had in its possession at the time they wrote the opinion from the editorial board. We made it very clear that we did not participate as an organization. Neither the California Homeless Union nor our affiliated Sacramento Homeless Union participated in, planned, or otherwise was an official part of the protest that took place at Mayor Steinberg's home. Secondly, we want to point out that to the extent that individuals who may or may not be members of our union or others who are in the homeless community that we represent, who may have been there, they were there participating peacefully in a peaceful protest, and I can state categorically did not participate in any acts of vandalism. The next thing I want to comment about is that the statement in the, or I should say the opinion that is advanced by the Sacramento Bee, which attempts to tie the California Homeless Union in with what they characterize as a mob, as a terrorists, political terrorists. And this falls into the category of per se slander. Slander means per se libel. Slander is a spoken defamatory statement, and libel is a published or a written defamatory statement. I'm not going to take too much time and teach a class on defamation law. It's something that we have some familiarity with, but statements that were made, let me just tell you off the bat that any statement which is not true, and even if it's within a opinion, it can still contain statements of alleged fact. Basically, a libel, defamation that's written, is per se a violation and per se defamatory if it makes an untrue statement and causes harm to the reputation of the person or organization who has been slandered or defamed. In the case of this editorial, it is clear on its face that by falsely associating us with vandalism, by lumping us together with individuals or groups that the Sacramento Bee calls political terrorists, by quoting, or misquoting, I should say, and quoting out of context and leaving out extremely relevant portions of our statement, there's no doubt from a legal standpoint in our minds that the Sacramento Bee may be subject to a defamation lawsuit. We have other things to pay attention to now, primarily taking care of our homeless community as the new storms approach, and to pursue, and I'll report on the next steps in our recall campaign. But it is almost certain that we will send a cease and desist letter to the Sacramento Bee as a precursor to possible legal action. I want to say that the editorial, if I could return to the editorial calls upon us, or faults the California Homeless Union for failing to condemn the what took place at the mayor's house. In the selective quotes in the editorial, they leave out key portions, including our statement that we took the position that we don't concede that vandalism necessarily took place. We specifically used language of, we referenced vandalism that was alleged if in fact it took place. That has not been determined. It's my understanding that not a single arrest was made, and yet there were at least 80 police officers. It seems to me that if vandalism, if they could had probable cause to make an arrest, those arrests would have been made. I'm not going to speak for any other organization that was there, or any other group or individual who's now being targeted for any kind of criminal conduct or vandalism. They can speak for themselves. Our organization is nonviolent. We did not condone what happened there, and that means that that we don't endorse, as a general matter, as a general proposition, destruction of property. We don't feel that it's an effective means for achieving the political objectives that our union has. And in fact, our union is known as the defenders of property, primarily the property that belongs to homeless people. I think it's a matter of public record, as the Sacramento Bee itself has pointed out in numerous stories carried in its newspaper that systematically, over the years, and including the time period under which the city was under a county health order to cease and desist from breaking up homeless encampments, destroying property belonging to homeless people, and otherwise dispersing homeless people throughout the city. The county health officer order specifically prohibited that activity and demanded that the CDC guidelines be followed in that respect. Within 48 hours after the county health officer order was issued, we were able to submit declarations showing that the police department under the Darrell Steinberg administration violated not only the county health officer order by continuing to break up encampments, but violated the court's order in instructing the city to obey health orders. Therefore, we returned to court and we were able to get what's called a writ of mandate. We got an order from Judge Lori Earle commanding and ordering the city to comply with health orders. We've since then been able to limit somewhat the sweeps, but in the last few weeks, we get increasing reports that despite that order, city police or agents of the city, again, under the direction of the Steinberg administration, are continuing to break up encampments, causing great harm, exposing homeless persons to the risk of community spread, and not just exposing homeless people, but the broader community. That's the chief reason why the CDC says leave the encampments alone and bring services to the encampments. Don't break them up, because if you break them up and separate people from services they're receiving and making it more difficult for them to get assistance, and this is even before the vaccination procedures became underway. Because if you disperse a homeless community and you can't find people, even if they get the first shot, good luck finding them for the second shot. So the Steinberg administration, despite its rhetoric and its public relations statements, we feel has failed and failed miserably to obey the law and to obey CDC guidelines and to conform to local court orders, and continues to disregard the well-being of the homeless. And not just the homeless, but the community at large. Finally, with regard to the statement, the editorial characterizes our homeless union statement, which I believe all of you received, and if you did not, we're happy to supply it to you. Falsely stated that we depicted the attack on Darrell Steinberg's house as justifiable. We never used the word justifiable, and we did not say it was justifiable. What we said was that we would neither condone nor condemn. That is not the equivalent of justifiable. Justifiable is not the equivalent of understandable or inevitable, or the product of the failure to address the concerns of the population most at risk. The SACB editorial also very conveniently left out a quote, direct quotation from Dr. Martin Luther King, who commented after the riots, or I should say the civil uprisings in Watts of 1965 and before that Harlem of 1964. And he was quoted as saying that the riot is the language of the unheard. That Dr. King framed his comments in the context of the failure of America to pay attention to the suffering, disease, death, racial inequality that at that time he was chiefly addressing the Black Americans. That was totally left out of the SACB's editorial and made no reference to that statement, which we think is quite a slight, considering that we're in Black History Month and only weeks away from having celebrated Dr. King's birthday. We lift up Dr. King, and I think that if he was asked to comment on what happened the other night, that he would probably have a similar sentiment. So I think, let me see if I've finished my comments on that. So I'll stop on that. I would imagine there's questions about the SACB editorial. Turning to the impact of the editorial, I think the Sacramento Bee needs to appreciate that it's the leading newspaper, not just in the city of Sacramento, the state capital, and a paper that has influence throughout Northern California, for that matter, the state. I think that the editorial board and the leadership of the Sacramento Bee needs to take into consideration the dangerous climate it has now helped to create by falsely identifying the California Homeless Union with acts of vandalism. We are already receiving threats of physical violence against members and officers of the union, which we take very seriously. We are now seeing what it seems to be an across-the-board defense of Mayor Steinberg and the linking of our recall campaign to the incidents that happened at his house. We also said in our statement that to the extent there was vandalism, we don't know that there was, and we don't condone the vandalism, but to the extent that there was, it pales by comparison to the 138 homeless deaths we had last year, and more specifically, pales by comparison to this at least 6 homeless people that died the night of the storm. Pales by comparison, excuse me, to Darrell Steinberg's failure to open the one warming shelter as people lined up and as the storm raged. They found nothing but a locked door dispersed throughout the community. We don't know the extent of injury and possibly additional deaths that were either wholly or partially attributable to that storm. I want to point out that Darrell Steinberg, not just once, but twice at the most recent, not the most recent, but the prior city council meeting, publicly assumed responsibility for what happened the night of the storm. Not just once, but twice. Assumed responsibility and said, hold me responsible. Well, that, in our view, has legal significance. In our view, the fact that the mayor assumed accountability for that, assumed responsibility for that, personal responsibility for that, is the most serious dereliction of duty, perhaps publicly confessed, that I, at least in my lifetime, and I'm a lifelong Californian, has ever witnessed a public official making. If anyone should be subject to a recall, if anyone has demonstrated their failure to carry out and discharge the duties of the highest elected office in the city of Sacramento, it's Darrell Steinberg. Our concern goes beyond the homeless. As our president, Crystal Sanchez, has pointed out repeatedly, and I'll note are now becoming part of our recall campaign, the small business community has been neglected. Darrell Steinberg has failed the small business community. We are no more interested in having homeless people curling up in the doorways and creating problems for our small business community than the small business owners themselves. And they're part of our recall effort, and we expect to see more such involvement. We are no more interested in exposing our police officers to the risk of COVID-19 than are the police, who are being dispatched into the city of Sacramento to carry out sweeps and otherwise put themselves and members of the homeless community at risk because of the disregard of the necessary COVID-19 protocols. We are no more interested in seeing people become homeless than are the people who live in low-cost, low-income housing now. The renters, the people are in motels, weekly rate motels, on the edge of homelessness. We're concerned, pardon me, that these issues, Darrell Steinberg's failures, which go all the way back to being a defendant in our lawsuit, having been found by a Superior Court judge to have violated a county health order, and a court order, and a person who personally campaigned against rent control, which we know has directly led to the increase in the number of homeless persons in Sacramento. So all the accolades in the world, all of the statements by Darrell Steinberg, I noticed that his response to the to our statement, even though he didn't directly address it, was to pat himself on the back, as others did on city council, on all the work he'd done for the homeless. He did not identify a single brick and mortar accomplishment, and neither did the editorial in the SAC-B. All that was said in the editorial, and this may have been the only true statement, or at least one of the true statements in that editorial, was that Darrell Steinberg had worked to raise funds. He had worked to get funds. Getting funds is one thing. How you allocate them, where those monies were or were not used to actually provide durable housing fit for human habitation is a completely other matter. So that's all I have on that. With regard to the recall itself, I want to report that we have, as of today, I'll just hold them up for a moment. These are two of our notices of intention to launch the recall. Each of these notices has the required, between them, the required minimum signatures of validly registered voters. That process, we're still in the process of obtaining more. And our intention is probably by the end of this week, we're probably the early part of next week, is to do as the city charter requires and the state of California requires for recall of city officials, to go ahead and serve Mayor Steinberg with the notices of recall, what they call the notices of intention to recall the mayor, and file those notices with the city clerk. We've been researching. We have been trying to get up to speed on the local and statewide requirements. We're confident that we've satisfied all of the obligations. The city clerk might disagree. This happens all the time in elections, recall, referendum, where there's disputes about whether the petitioners or the proponents of the recall or nominators for elected of office have complied with all the regulations. If there are issues, and if we can't work them out, or if we feel that the city or any official who challenges our signatures or the petitions themselves, and we disagree, we'll go to court if necessary. That's not an unusual thing that takes place. We're going to do everything necessary to get the recall underway. If our petitions are rather the notices are accepted, the next step would be for us to draft and submit for approval by the city clerk the actual recall petition. And we'll talk about that when we get to that step. And as soon as we've submitted the notices and served Mayor Steinberg, we will report to you all the results of that action, which I say will happen either at the end of this week or certainly by the Monday or Tuesday of next week. Finally, I want to say that we have also made it very clear. Oh, let me also point out, I kind of forgot to mention this, and it needs to be said, that our issue with Mayor Steinberg extends to, in particular, to the most marginalized sections of the Sacramento community: the homeless, persons of color, people with disabilities. I'll tell you that roughly 40% of the homeless in Sacramento are people of color. Most of them are workers, former workers, injured workers, people, most of them spent their whole lives in Sacramento. And I noticed that the city wants to put up a Black Lives Matter, some kind of Black Lives Matter sculpture. That's fine and dandy, but did the lives of the people who perished in the storm, did they matter? Some of them were Black. Did the lives of the 138 people that died last year matter? Many of them were Black. It's time to replace all the talk and all the symbolism and all the phony speeches to actual brick and mortar accomplishments when it comes to everything from housing to policing to employment to public health. Finally, we are urging, and our union has already begun the process of contacting Governor Gavin Newsom, urging him to refrain from identifying and drop from consideration for replacement of Javier Becerra, who now is part of the Biden cabinet. We are urging the governor to immediately drop from consideration Mayor Darrell Steinberg. The reports are pretty widespread now that he's a front runner for that position. We have already informed him and will continue to inform and continue to develop a community awareness and seek community support and ask Governor Newsom, does he want to appoint as the highest law enforcement officer in the state of California someone who is currently under a court order and found to have violated it, who is currently a defendant in a major case of the Sacramento Homeless Union et al. Versus the city of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg et al. And we hope that he'll make the right decision and drop Mr. Steinberg from consideration. Finally, I said finally, but lawyers say that all the time, and they add another thing. If I could return to the editorial, the Sacramento Bee has said that we've lost all credibility by refusing to condemn the vandalism, the alleged vandalism that took place at Mayor Steinberg's house. We didn't, as I say, we don't condone it. We do not feel that that is helpful to specifically what we're trying to do, and not truly effective in building the kind of broad social movement and organization of poor and homeless people that our union is all about. Nevertheless, we refuse to condemn it for the reasons I've already explained. So the Sacramento Bee has said that we have now lost all credibility by failing to shake our finger at the people who are out in front of Mayor Steinberg's house and take them to the woodshed and put them in a corner and publicly reprove them for having done that. But I want to raise the question of credibility. I want to show you who has credibility. Who has credibility? We have a letter here that was written in December by the then head of the Department of Public Health, City Department of Public Health. This is a letter to whom it may concern, authorizing and identifying to law enforcement officers and anyone else who might ask, every member of the homeless union or persons working under the direction of the homeless union as essential workers. And why? Quote, these services include but are not limited to meals, donations, distribution of donations, advocacy, resourcing, connecting those resources within the camps, storage, inventory, legal, collaborating with partner organizations, sanitation, supplies, COVID-19 health updates. I think we have some credibility. I also want to point out that Crystal Sanchez, just a couple of weeks ago, was one of the featured speakers in Women's March Sacramento, which was viewed by thousands and was part of a selection process that considered a number of applicants to be speakers, and she was one of the featured speakers. Do we have credibility? Over the last year, almost year, no one has been more active in the camps to save lives, to teach people about COVID-19, to get hand washing facilities, and to make a fight in the courts to protect our least vulnerable. I think that the Sacramento Bee itself may believe that we have now given up our credibility, but I invite them to talk to the health officials, to talk to the homeless themselves, to talk to some 300 volunteers that we have still assisting us in this direct work, to talk to the medical students, the encampment medical team, and see what they think about the credibility of our homeless union versus the credibility of Darrell Steinberg. We're not the ones who are violating court orders. We're not the ones who are who have publicly taken responsibility for injuries, death, and destruction. Just the opposite. We're the ones who have been fighting tooth and nail to preserve the property, lives, and safety of those we represent. So I've gone on longer than I should have. I apologize. Maybe I covered some of your questions, but I'm happy to take questions at this time.
So really quick too, Anthony, can you touch on the reason, the number one question that we've received as the homeless union is why we are why we are not investigating Howard Chan?
Yes, I'm glad you raised that up. Howard Chan, of course, is the city manager. He is not subject to recall. He's a hired official or a hired um, employee, so to speak, of the city of Sacramento. It's within the purview of the city council to terminate his services, and many people called for that, and we support the effort, and we definitely agree that Howard Chan, given his role in this debacle with the warming shelter being locked, should not continue to be city manager. We fault Darrell Steinberg and other members of the city council, but certainly the mayor, for not introducing a resolution to terminate Mr. Howard Chan, which is the only way that he can be removed as city manager. He is not subject to recall because he's not an elected official. Only elected officials are subject to recall. I think that the finger pointing, we see that all the time in these circumstances. There's plenty of blame to go around. We hold Howard Chan responsible. We hold certain other members of the city council, whereas other members have been champions of the poor and the business community and the citizens of Sacramento. Others have not demonstrated that commitment. We're ready to hold everybody and anybody responsible for dereliction of their
You informed with
respective
news that
duties.
matters. Fox 40 News.
Yeah, hold on one second, Fox 40. So Howard Chan, we're not targeting Howard Chan because we feel that the most directly responsible is the mayor. He's the chief officer, chief elected, highest elected official in the city. He assumed responsibility for what happened, and we're going to hold him accountable. So that's what we have to say about Howard Chan. I think those who are saying, "Oh, you should be focusing here and not here," we disagree with that. We're focusing on what we believe is the most culpable individual here and the one who is subject to recall. Had the city council moved, had Darrell Steinberg even suggested, "Well, let's get rid of this guy," that would be another matter. But we add that to the number of charges against Mayor Steinberg. I watched that city council meeting, and every one of them, well, not every one of them, I take that back. Certain members of the city council, including Mayor Steinberg, it was just a club of mutual admiration society. And Howard Chan was just extolled, and he's doing a great job. So his failures were ratified, as far as I'm concerned, by Mayor Steinberg. If anything, it makes it even more justifiable that we're going after Mayor Steinberg.
Thank you, Anthony. And also, just to throw in a few more words, this is, again, Crystal Sanchez, the president of the Sacramento Homeless Union. We received reports statewide of multiple deaths, the same type of trauma that happened in Sacramento with the destruction of camps. And so we don't have an accurate number statewide of people who died that Tuesday, but multiple people did die. We had people crossing rivers. And so this is a huge issue, as he is the chair of the homeless task force. And so we are also looking into this statewide. Does anybody have any questions?
Let me add one thing, Chris, before we get to the question. And that is on that, yes, that is, again, that's an appointed position. We are, as I said a moment ago, we are pressuring Governor Steinberg to drop him from consideration for Attorney General, and also to drop him as the co-chair. He is co-chair of the statewide commission on homelessness and supportive housing, along with LA Council member Mark Ridley Thomas. That Darrell Steinberg needs to be immediately taken off the mission. But we have also begun the process of seeking a criminal investigation. We have, I'm not going to share this because there are witnesses that we wish to protect. We want the acting state attorney general to undertake an investigation and to determine if there's probable cause to lodge criminal charges. And so we're not going to make public anything about that aspect of our work. But I can report to you that we have initiated the process of requesting and supplying the evidence that we do have in hand to the state attorney general.
With that, does anybody have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes, I have a question. You sued the city in the summer for the police violating the COVID-19 guidelines with sweeping encampments. Chan said he did not open the warming centers because it would have violated the same guidelines. Would you not have sued because it would have benefited your cause?
Okay, I can't quite understand your question. Could you state again? I'm not sure I
Yeah.
understand it.
So in the summer, you guys successfully sued, I believe it was Darrell Steinberg because of, or maybe it was the city police for violating COVID-19 guidelines because they were sweeping encampments.
Yes.
Now, Howard Chan said that the same COVID-19 guidelines are the reason why he did not open the warming centers that night of the storm. Would you guys not have sued because it benefited your cause?
Okay, well, first of all, the defendants in our lawsuit, and the lawsuit is still ongoing. And what we got was a writ of mandate, but the underlying lawsuit is still on, in effect. And we sued the city and Darrell Steinberg and the chief of police for violating the county health officer order, which in turn required conformity to the CDC guidelines of not to break up encampments during the pandemic because it would increase community spread. And so, I'm not sure what you mean by our cause. We don't have a cause. We're a union. We are an equivalent of a workplace union in many respects in that we represent the interests of our members. Our cause is to give a voice to those who don't have a voice, as Dr. King characterized them, the unheard. And so there's no political motivation there. What my comments were a moment ago was that we have observed police not wearing masks, and that puts the people they interact with at risk, and it puts the police officers. There's footage of sweeps that we have, reels of footage of sweeps from of different parts of the city where it's quite evident the police are not conforming to the mask requirement. In other cases, they are. I would think most police officers are concerned for their safety, their family's safety, and we're concerned for their safety and their family's safety as well. You know, we don't wish this dreaded pandemic on anybody, and that was the purpose of my comments. We don't have a political motivation. We don't, we have a lot of members. We have thousands of members, but we don't have the kind of legal resources to go after everybody and anybody. And so where we can't go after people in court, we just bring notice to what's going on, public attention, call, kind of meetings like this, press conferences like this. And so I don't know if I've answered your question, Alex, but I tried.
Yes, thank
Did
you.
I answer your question?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. I do want our media to know, though, that we have done our due diligence when it has come to this. It hasn't been a planned recall type thing from the beginning. We have sent out multiple letters of warnings of what temperatures do to people, including from doctors. We have put the city on notice that, sweeping people, especially in a pandemic, is deadly. They continue to ignore us, and this isn't the first time that the mayor has been in hot water when it comes to extreme weather conditions. On January the 23rd, 2019, he apologized publicly for pushing people out in 50-mile-an-hour winds in the rain at 2 a.m. So these are things that have continually happened.
Could I say one more thing, Crystal, before we end?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Crystal, could I say one more thing that, if I could, one more minute?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, my internet.
Okay, I don't think I answered part of Alex's question. Forgive me, it's been a long day. I think Alex also talked about he brought in the question of Howard Chan, and Howard Chan used the excuse that the COVID-19 guidelines prevented him from opening the shelter. And I don't know if by that he referred to that there's restrictions on how many people can be in the shelter, social distancing. I don't know if he meant that, something about the status of the encampments. But it is our position that that shelter should have been opened, and that it would have been possible to comply as much as possible with distancing and distribution of masks and other measures to do whatever was necessary as best could be done to protect those in the shelter. But there's no question. The city announced the shelter, I understand. Darrell Steinberg had a little temper tantrum the next night, insisting that it should have been opened. So that, as far as I'm concerned, that's a legal admission that it would have been proper to open that shelter. And the most overriding consideration is that there was almost hurricane force winds and rain, the combination of which the temperatures well below they reach freezing. I think he referenced the requirement of temperatures reaching freezing before they can open the shelter. But the fact of the matter, and I think the county officials pointed this out, and we independently researched it, and Darrell Steinberg took responsibility. He had the authority to open that shelter. And he did not, there's no question that that any excuse that Howard Chan or anyone else wants to make for not doing it is bogus. And so we reject that categorically. We had 6 people die, and they directly or indirectly related to the storm. I don't think even at this point we've gotten full report from the coroner that we're making efforts to get the death certificates, which are, I believe, in most cases, public record. And we want to see what they say. We want to see what the cause of death is. Normally, when homeless people die, they write down natural causes, and they attribute it to the specific medical circumstance, and the context is never mentioned. The context needs to be mentioned on these death certificates. And so that's another aspect of this. But Howard Chan's justification is not meritorious.
All right. Last call. Do we have any more
Ms.
questions?
Crystal? Yeah,
I
Ms.
think we got a
Crystal,
question.
Charles. I have one quick question.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Charles.
Hello? Yeah, again, I'm just trying to get some clarity on you. Can you speak to the process after the recall? Like, is it next man up, special election?
Oh, yes. Good point. Yeah, I actually had that in my notes. I'm glad you asked that. So here's the process briefly. We submit the notice of intention, assuming that gets approved by the city clerk. The next step is that we have to prepare a petition, the actual recall petition, in conformity with city charter and state guidelines. And then we submit that for approval. And the clerk generally has about 7 days to do these various things. She has to approve or disapprove our notice of intention. She has to approve or disapprove our draft petition for the actual recall. But once all that's done, and once those steps have been successfully taken, we then have 160 days to collect 10% of the registered voters in the city of Sacramento. The number of registered voters in the city of Sacramento we understand to be approximately 285,000, which means that we would need to get 10% of that, which is about 28,500. And so that would be, we have 160 days. We think we can do it in a much shorter time period. We're confident that we're going to be able to get the volunteers that we need, where they're already contacting us on a daily, almost hourly basis. And so we're getting our mechanism into place to roll out that recall campaign. And so even if we can't do it in fewer than 160 days, we're very confident that we're going to succeed in getting that done. And then once we get that requisite number of valid signatures, then it's actually put on a ballot. There will be probably a special election scheduled. I don't know of an already scheduled election coming up. Generally, they'll put it on the next scheduled election, assuming that falls after the 160-day period to get the signatures, and they'll schedule a special election if there is no regular election scheduled. My thinking is that a special election would be scheduled, and what would appear on that ballot would be, do you want mayors, not in this precise language, but do you want Mayor Darrell Steinberg to be recalled from office? And people can say no, and then that's as far as it goes. If they say yes, then next to that box will be a list of candidates who have already filed nominating papers and other requirements to be candidates to replace Darrell Steinberg. And that could be, I believe, as many as satisfy the nomination requirements. They would have to circulate their own nominating petitions and meet those requirements. So that's a good point, Charles. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another area we anticipate support from, is those who, for whatever their reason is, want to see, may want to become mayor, think they can do a better job than Darrell Steinberg, want Darrell Steinberg replaced for a host of reasons. And I think that we've already had some indications that there are people considering that, who already have substantial support, resources, and may provide, the man/woman power / every gender power to human power to help us with the recall, because it's in their interest to have him recalled so that they can have a chance now in 2021 to become the next mayor, rather than have to wait till 2024. Does that answer your question, Charles? Does that answer your question, Charles?
I think you said yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
Anthony, this is Zoe also at the Homeless Union. And can you clarify that the incumbent who is subject to recall, are they or are they not able to run for office on that ballot?
They cannot. They cannot.
Thank you.
Let me also say, because this has come to our attention, some people are concerned that if Steinberg is recalled, that someone already on the city council or the vice mayor or whoever it is would simply step in. That is not the case. As I said a moment ago, if Steinberg receives the requisite number of votes to be recalled, he's no longer an office holder, and whoever receives the most votes on that ballot from amongst candidates to take his place will become the mayor.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions, this will be available. If you would like a copy of this press conference, go ahead and email me or email Anthony. And we appreciate you all for attending. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.